Hello, and welcome. Hey, my name is Mark Aylward, and not sure how you may have found me online. I sent out links to this LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so Quora, and some of it was just word of mouth. I was walking. Well, before I go there, my background is I've had about 30 years of experience as a recruiter. And during that time, most of my time was spent helping software engineers find work. And and for 25 of those years, I was a small business owner. So I've been an entrepreneur as well for 25 years. And in that process, started, built, and sold two staffing companies. So I was outside the other day walking in the midst of all this craziness, and my neighbor was outside, and she came over, and we started talking. And many of you perhaps have found this to be the case as well. During troubling times, sometimes we get the chance to get to know people a little bit better than we might otherwise. And she started talking to me about her employment situation and how concerned she was. She was clearly anxious and worried, and wanted to talk to somebody about this. And I was just going out for a walk. So when she started asking me questions, I said, I've been a recruiter my whole life. Helping people find work in trying times is kind of what I do. And I'm happy to sit down and we can talk through whatever challenges you're having. And hopefully in the meantime, between now and when you have to start looking for work, if that happens, you'll be much more prepared. And you could just see her anxiety just dissipate. And I thought to myself when I was walking away, boy, she can't be alone in that. And there's got to be a lot of people out there that are worried or concerned or scared or feeling some shame maybe because they got laid off through no fault of their own. And so I thought, well, I'm not a technical genius, but why don't I set something up live where people can just come on. I'm doing it here at noon because hopefully anybody who's breaking for lunch can join. And I got a bunch of people that sent me some questions, which I can go ahead and answer. And hopefully the answers will be to the benefit of a lot of different people. But if you have your own questions and you're here with me now, go ahead and write them down in the questions area, and I'll tick them off if we can get to them. This will be recorded as well, so it'll be here on my page, Seven Pillars page, and forever is what I'm told. And so if you haven't the opportunity to sit with us now, then please check out the recording. I would assume that recording goes live just a few minutes after we conclude here, which should be about an hour. So back to my background in helping people find work, and teaching people how to help people find work, hiring recruiters, hiring salespeople. You really get to look at the holistic dynamic of how companies hire people, how companies look for people, how companies onboard people, train people, what they look for. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, which I guess is the case in most professions. And so I'm going to say some things that are unconventional, and I'm going to say some things that might feel fundamental or foundational to you. And my intent is not to be condescending. I just don't want to presume that people know things. I'd like to share the answers. And if you know it, great. If you can use it differently, great. If it adds context, great. And if it's just redundant, my apologies. But as I said to all my employees and my children, I would rather be redundant than remiss, because this stuff's important. So the first question that I have is, it's a very broad question, but everyone probably that's looking for work or looking to do something different would probably benefit from the answer. So the question is, what's the best way to find a job? And certainly it depends on your circumstances, how experienced you are, what kind of degrees or certifications or qualifications that you have. But generally speaking, I tell people all the time, the first thing to do if you're looking for work, challenged, troubled, what have you, is to take the opportunity to assess and reassess what it is you want to do. What have you been doing? Why are you doing it? We often don't ask ourselves these questions, and I think a lot of us kind of are floating around out there and we're operating under the presumption of someone else's opinion. it starts in the home with your family and your dad and your mom, and then there's teachers and there's coaches and there's guidance counselors, and then you have mentors, and for senior people, you've got colleagues and boards of directors and all these other, and everyone has an opinion, and most of them are valid. Some of them are not. You can probably discern between the two, but it's a great time to sit down and say, am I doing what I want to be doing? And can I do what I want to do and make money at it? And there's a series of exercises, all of which are kind of available in workbooks and stuff on my website, which is the number 7 and the word pillars, PILLARS, global, GLOBAL.com. It's a lot of free stuff there. There's a lot of links to all of my social profiles. There are a couple of them like Quora and LinkedIn, where I've got hundreds of articles and answered hundreds of questions. So if you need more after this, you can certainly engage my services if you like, but that's not the point. The point is, if you are willing and have the time and the energy, you can go to my website, and between what's on my site and what you can get to from my site, those social profiles, there's an MBA in how to find work there. There's an MBA, there's a graduate degree just in what I've written. And so you don't need to hire me. You don't need to hire anybody. What happens when you hire somebody is they should be able to expedite the journey. They should be able to make the journey less frustrating and faster and more satisfying. And that the acceleration of that process is what you pay money for. But the process exists. It's written. It's in video and written content, and you can get connected to it. So go there and consume whatever you'd like. Everybody's circumstances are different. So that would, the best way to find a job is to really, really have a clear understanding of what it is you want to do, what it is you can do. And then the second big step in that is most people get a resume together. They don't feel comfortable with the resume because we're not professional resume writers. Well, I might be, but most of you probably aren't. And they take that resume and they go into the internet online ether, as I say. It's portals where job descriptions exist and companies are advertising for specific types of people. And I'm not suggesting that's a bad way, but it's the most frustrating, least productive way. And the worst part about it is when you send a bunch of resumes out into the ether, it gives you a sense of accomplishment when there may not be any. And so it's kind of dangerous. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably expressed frustration in looking for work. Most of the people that come to me for my help are frustrated, or they're not coming to me yet until they get frustrated. So the best way to find a job is to reach out to your personal and professional network and let everybody know that you're looking and exactly what it is that you're looking for, because people like to help, particularly in trying times. One of the reasons I'm doing this is I just wanted to help. So we skip over that step, and before you reach out and before you ask for favors or introductions or referrals or whatever you want to call these things, you should have a shiny LinkedIn profile, because that's where people are going to go. If you're not a professional, if you're in the trades, I still think you should have a LinkedIn profile, because everyone's online now and everyone's going there. I mean, people are going to look at your LinkedIn profile, most of you, before they look at your resume. They might not even see your resume. So sending resumes out to people that are not decision makers, to jobs that are online that may or may not exist, and that is true. A lot of the jobs that are out there posted are either have been filled, pulled, and not pulled down yet. They lost their budget money, or they're just fishing, because a lot of companies put up profiles of people they anticipate they'll need in the future, but they don't need now. So the fact that you're not getting responses when you put it in that context makes sense. So you polish up your resume, you polish up your profile, you reach out to your network and you let everybody know what's going on and what you're looking for. And I've had people that I've helped in the past, just doing that found them work. So don't gloss over that. And then once you figure out that, with all due respect to human resources people, valid function, they do a lot of different things, but hiring critically skilled people is additional work that they shouldn't have to do. They don't like doing it, and most of the time, and not many of them do it well. So the person that makes the decision, the person to whom you would report, you need to figure out a way to get in touch with that person. And very few people even try that. They think it's pushy, or they think it's this, or they think it's that, or it's too aggressive. I can't do that. That's scary. It's like, well, maybe, but I can't tell you how many stories I've had of people that have taken that advice and through connections, second connections, first connections, third connections on LinkedIn, people that they know who know somebody that work at that particular company. If you do your diligence online with all the tools that are out there right now, you ought to be able to get at least identify who the person is that you should be speaking to. And anybody worth his or her weight in professional salt, if someone appropriately and politely yet aggressively gets in touch with me and I have the need for a salesperson, say, all I'm going to do is appreciate the courage that it took. And I'm going to give that person the opportunity to at least speak for a few minutes so I can figure out whether he or she is articulate. It's the opposite of what you would think it would be. And frankly, if you're articulate and polite and you ask someone for help, and they get snooty or snitty, or they don't want to help you, well, you validated that that's not somebody that you should be working for anyway. And you did it pretty quickly, so you save yourself some time. So that's a topic I could talk about forever, but it really is about reframing your mindset, how to find a new job, giving yourself permission to seek work that you love, to work with people that you like, to be reasonable in terms of commute and conditions and culture and benefits and all those things. You have permission to get those things, to look for those things, to ask for those things. And then don't take the passive route of sending out resumes to 200 online portal job descriptions. I mean, you can do it. It's not going to harm you. Most of the people that I've talked to that have done it, though, it kind of does harm them because it gives them false hope, and then it becomes extremely frustrating, which creates anxiety. So those switches, just look at it a little bit differently, and I think you'll find that very, very helpful. Should I use a recruiter is another question that I got. And this brings me back to a story I have about my younger brother who recently found a new job through help from his older brother, me, after waiting for months to call me to tell me he was looking for a new job. And one of the things he asked me about was I'm dealing with this recruiter or these recruiters, and I said, tell me what's going on. And he gave me some information, and it became very clear to me that he was holding back from telling the recruiter certain things. What should I tell him I make? I tell him what you make. I mean, all this stuff is going to come out in the wash if you get to the end and you get an offer anyway. You're probably going to have to fill out paperwork and all this other stuff. Recruiters, yeah, you should use a recruiter if you can find a good one. There aren't very many. I am one, and I can say that because there are no barriers to entry to become a recruiter. If you can talk on the telephone, you can become a recruiter. And so that's probably part of it. The way we get paid is part of it too. I don't get paid if I'm placing you in a permanent job until you start working and stay there for a period of time, 30, 60, 90 days. It's called a guarantee period. And then I get paid. So if I don't find you the right job that you don't even want to stick around and do for more than 90 days, all of that time I spent is wasted. So what does that mean in terms of working with a recruiter? Just understand how they're paid so that you understand how they're motivated. And you should know as much about them as they know about you. A lot of us, I've found, a lot of people will talk to a recruiter very briefly because the recruiter contacts them and says, I have an opportunity for you. And they just send their resume, and they really don't know what kind of relationship the recruiter has with the client. They don't know if they're a junior recruiter or a senior recruiter. They don't know if they specialize in your particular craft or they're just a generalist. And so you're giving your reputation to someone that you don't know anything about. And frankly, if you're working in a particular geographic market and you give your resume to a handful of recruiters without qualifying them and asking them how they do what they do and what they're going to do with your reputation and your resume, then you're running the risk of your reputation being tarnished. And the other possibility is two recruiters send your resume to the same potential employer. Most employers step back and say, I'm not going to get into an argument about who gets the fee, so I'm just not going to talk to this candidate. So this is all going on behind the scenes, and no one's telling you this stuff. And again, I could talk, there's a lot of nuance in how to deal with a recruiter. There's a lot. And so it's not for this forum, but those things there is, again, you have a couple of really key points there. And one is Know them as well as they know you, and don't just send your resume to anybody. Okay, more is not better. My brother had said to me, "Well, I didn't call you because you don't do healthcare and you don't do Nashville, Tennessee." And I smiled and over the phone and I said, 95% of what I do has nothing to do with either one of those things. And I picked up the phone and I called the guy who used to work for me, who relocated his family to Nashville and was a recruiter. And he was a technical recruiter, but he had a relationship with the head of human resources at a large insurance company, healthcare company. And within 3 weeks, my brother had a better job for more money and didn't have to relocate his family back to Connecticut to headquarters. So, you know, that was my brother. He knows exactly what I do. Yet he set out to look for work like everyone does because he just thought that was the way to do it. And then I shared some of this stuff on how to work with recruiters, and he had 4 or 5 epiphanies on the phone call with me. So, ask for help and understand how recruiters get paid, understand how that motivates them on your behalf, and do your homework. Get to know them before you just give them your reputation. I get this question a lot, and I'm not sure why, but since I get it a lot, I'll answer it. The question is, should I use a cover letter? Well, since I don't believe that a resume is the best way to get a job, although you should have one and it should be written well and it should be concise and succinct and have metrics, the cover letter is just another piece of information. I mean, what's a cover letter going to say that you can't say in your resume? And I know that there are HR professionals and talent professionals out there that would disagree with me, and that's fine. All I know is people that look at resumes, they don't like looking at resumes. So giving them another piece of paper or another page to look at, I think you're discouraging them from reading further. And who's going to say anything on their cover letter that is not flattering and subjective and complimentary? I mean, to me, it's just fluff. So I think you're creating more of a burden for the potential employer, and you're not accomplishing anything. And by the way, what I said there is key to how you write your resume and how you use your resume. Is everyone in the process of reviewing resumes does not want to be reviewing resumes. Most people hate it, right? I hear it all the time. Because as a recruiter, I go to a company, I say, well, they say, what's your fee? And I say, 25, 30%. And they say, that's pretty high. And I say, well, in what context? How many resumes do you look at before you decide to interview somebody? Most people don't even know. So I said, well, let's say it's 15 or 20. Yeah, it sounds reasonable. What if that was 2? What would that be worth for you or worth to you? So yeah, I'm not a fan of cover letters, and those are the reasons why. Money. Yeah, I remember when I was first coached my children, who were all young adults, to help them find work, and then to help them start their own companies. The idea of talking about money is like, it's a big deal for people that are not accustomed to talking about money. And there's all kinds of emotion wrapped around that, like what you're worth and self-worth and self-loathing and confidence and anxiety and don't want to say the wrong thing at the wrong time and lose the opportunity. There's a lot of emotion packed into this conversation about money. And so when you're in a full-time job, you are negotiating salary. You might be negotiating bonuses or commissions or vested 401k contributions or what have you, equity, profit sharing. And then when you have your own company, it's pricing. How do I price my stuff? Is this too expensive? Is it not? Am I underselling myself? And it's the same conversation, right? The first thing you have to do is you have to understand what your value is, right? And then you have to really have a clear understanding of what it costs you to live every month to the standard to which you're accustomed. And then decide whether you have any areas in there where you can make movement and sacrifice, maybe some comforts for a period of time for a particular opportunity. And that's a conversation you have to have with yourself, before you go out and have it with someone else, and the other things that I like to share about money are, when do you talk about money? Well, you never talk about money. unless someone else brings it up, right? The only the only exception to that rule would be if you're filling out an application online. I would suspect you're not doing that in person anymore. But and you come to a place, a box, a field that says, "What are you looking for?" And you cannot move forward with the application unless you put a number in there. I don't think there are any other exceptions to that. And then you have to determine. That's why you have to know what that number is, right? Because that number then becomes the lowest denominator. So let's say it's $90,000. You just can't live on less than $90,000 or 20,000, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. 150,000. Then you put that number in there and you recognize that that might be the reason they don't want to talk to you. You know, so um, you have to fill out the box or you can't do the application. So you really have nothing to lose. But all other circumstances, you only talk about money. And if you're able to on an application, you use the word open or you use the word negotiable. Those are the only two options if you can get away with not putting a number to move forward with the application. In terms of the physical interview process or online video interview process, it never comes up until they say, okay, let's talk about money, or what are you looking for? And, you know, at that point, they probably already have the information about what you're making. And if you've got unique circumstances that you've been laid off, or you know, you bumped around from job to job because of circumstances beyond your control, whatever, just don't make it sound like you're making excuses. And the best answer that I've ever given to anybody, and use your own voice, use your own tone, use your own personality, but it's like, you know, I'm not here because of money. I mean, obviously I need money to live, and I have a certain lifestyle that I'm accustomed to, and then I have a certain market value that I think I'm fairly aware of. But I'm here for the opportunity. The things that are important to me are who you are, where I can go in this organization, how much I can bring to the organization, what kind of opportunities can we collectively pursue, and how much what is it going to be a good combination of hard work in the right direction and fun, you know? And so use whatever intangible qualities are important to most human beings. And you're positioning yourself also as not being driven by money or greedy or selfish or anything like that. For most people, those things are true. Whether we recognize those things as being important to us on a day-to-day basis, where you work, who you work for, their values, their culture, their perks, the flexibility of schedule, you know, remote work, all of these things that are important to us are the reason that you want to say yes to an offer. The money, unless it's disparately low or incredibly high and shocking, which would be a great problem to have, it's never the money. You know, once you got your bills paid and you have a little money to do some stuff, then work becomes about a whole different litany of other important things that are way more important to your happiness than money. So never bring it up first, and answer it deferentially. And if somebody says to you, look, that sounds nice and flowery and wonderful, you obviously were coached really well with that answer, but I need a number. And I'm like, well, then if we don't have any more discovery, in other words, if you've answered all my questions and I've answered all your questions and we're ready to go, then I would have to say, for a number, knowing the history, you have some information, you have some history with what it might be, then I would say, you know, I would need a minimum of, say, $75,000 for it to make sense for me and my family. And then start the conversation. You know, what's the person going to say? Oh, that's way too much. Well, that starts the conversation for me. How much is way too much? And move the conversation that way. Oh yeah, no, 75. That should not be an issue. As a matter of fact, I think you're probably worth a little bit more than that. So money's not going to be an obstacle if we get to the offer stage. Doesn't sound like it. Doesn't sound like it. That's the way to talk about money. And on the pricing side for your services, what I always used to do is I want to be the most expensive and the best. Because if the people I'm talking to are interested in the best, then they're much less likely to be concerned about cost. They're more interested in what the value proposition is. What will they get from paying this amount of money? So my margins were always higher than other people, and I had factual data to support why. It's like, you're paying for this proficiency. You're paying for, we're going to utilize far less of your time, which is very valuable. In return, you're not going to have to talk to 30 people. You're going to have to talk to 2 and then make a decision. Your life is going to be made exceedingly easier, and you're going to have a very productive resource faster, which will also either make you money or save you money, or you wouldn't be looking for that resource in the first place. Because every resource should either make you money or save you money, and preferably both. So money is not something to be concerned about. I did some videos. I got some video up on YouTube that talks about negotiation and how to prepare for interviews and what you need to know before you start your own business. It's good stuff. You know, it's not flashy videography, but the content's solid. So go take a look. Let's see. I went on an interview recently and I never heard back, and I was concerned because I thought the interview went really well. Well, I get this one a lot too, and you know, it's interesting. It's something that you really need the answer to this question before the question comes up. But for anyone who is about to go on an interview or anticipating an interview, the way to handle follow-up, presuming that you like what you heard and they liked you, and that's an educated guess on your part, but people give signs. I mean, if you're in there for an hour, chances are it went well. Otherwise, you would have been dismissed in 15 or 20 minutes. Because if I find out I'm not interested in somebody in an interview, I don't prolong their agony. I say, I don't think there's a good fit here, and I think you'd be better served doing something else. And but thank you for your time, and you know, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So, you know, in terms of okay, the interview is coming to a close, and again, it's like a first date, right? You want a second date, and you think that he does, she does as well. And they say, well, okay, great. Oh, that went great, Mark. You know, we'll get back to you real soon because we want to make a decision. Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for your time. Well, now it's your responsibility. That's not the way to handle that situation. The way to handle that situation is, well, I tell you what, since you've got a lot going on, obviously interviewing people and very busy, I would like to suggest that if I don't hear from you, let's say by next Wednesday by 3 o'clock or so, why don't I give you a call, and just to take that off your calendar reminder list. And so you're positioning it as doing a favor, which it is, but you also now have permission to call Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And so people always say, I don't want to be a pest, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to be... Well, you set the wrong expectations. You left without setting the right expectations. And in the context of that, one of my favorite pieces of advice from a consultant that worked with me for a couple of years was, the best sign that a meeting went well is that you scheduled the next meeting. And I think that's just a solid rule of thumb in the process of interviewing, because I hear that from people all the time. And when I coach people to go on interviews, I share that information with them, and 50% of the people walk out the door without doing it. And then they call me and say, what do I do? And I say, well, what you do is what I told you should have done. And there's other ways around that. But I mean, if you're worried about being a pest or a nuisance, I would say, well, where's that coming from? You know, so you didn't button it up properly. Shame on you. Move forward. Make the call and get your feedback. Because again, if you're polite and professional, if somebody's going to get upset that you're following up on something that they spent an hour doing a week ago, that's unreasonable, you know? So again, that's a sign that this person might be somebody that you need to reconsider working for. You know, some of these things are good, even though they're maybe confrontational or feel negative, because they reach a logical conclusion faster. They waste less of your time. You know, it's frustrating to go through the entire process and not really understand what's going on. You know, so don't be shy about following up, but you should button that up. Put the person in a proverbial box with a specific time and a specific day, and position it as you trying to respect their busy schedule. Okay, so the next one here is, these are good questions. What kind of questions should I ask of potential employers? So first of all, it's a good question because you know you're supposed to have questions when you go on the interview. I cannot tell you how many times in 30 years I've had somebody come into an interview And at the end, when I was done asking what I needed to ask, and I looked the person in the eye and said, "What kind of questions can I answer for you?" And they say to me, "No, I think you answered all my questions. Thank you very much." Um, if memory serves me, that has always been a deal breaker for me, because it is such an indication that the person is either not interested and has just wasted my time, or doesn't understand his or her responsibility to come to an interview prepared, which has a litany of attached potential issues to it. So you might get to the end of the interview, and the fact of the matter is they did ask all the questions, but you have a piece of paper or a pad or notepad or whatever in front of you, and you're going down and you say, "No, you answered this one. We talked about that. No, you have. I brought 10 questions with me, and you answered every single one of them. But maybe you could just expand on number 7 here. Give them something." But that's proof that you prepared. So even if they did answer all the questions, you still are positioned as a professional person who has done his homework. Okay? So the types of questions, I like to first and foremost go, again, to the person's LinkedIn profile that I'm going to be meeting with. If you're going to be meeting with more than one person, look them all up. And look them up on Facebook. You know, you can creep people out by getting a little too personal about knowing their kids' names or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about where they went to school, what they like to do for kicks. You know, are they sports enthusiasts? Do they like going to the beach? I mean, look for common ground, familiarity. You may or may not bring it up in conversation. It may or may not be appropriate, but you got it in the bag. You got it in your backpack, right? If you don't need it, so what? But if you need it and you don't have it, you're screwed. So there's personal questions. I like to know things like, how do you view leadership? How do you view mentorship? How do you view entrepreneurial spirit? You know, what's the culture of the environment? One of my favorite questions is, why do you work here? Why do you like working here? What keeps you coming back here? When other people call you, other recruiters call you, and you say no, why? And then, you know, when you ask a question like that, many of these questions require thoughtful responses. So in order for people to be able to respond thoughtfully, for you to get the information that you're interested in getting, you need to pause and give the person a chance to speak. One of the things that I talk to people about all the time when they speak is, you need to leave silence at the end of your sentence or the end of your question, always. Particularly if you're speaking with someone who is clearly a thoughtful person. Because what you ask about culture, your brain's got to circle around that and grab on to the answer. You got to give me a sec. So don't do what most people do. Don't be tempted to fill in the answer for him. And I'll give you an example. So how much do you make? I'm the interviewer now. Silence. Oh, this is uncomfortable. Oh, silence. So is it more than 100 grand? Oh yeah. Well, now you still don't know, right? It's more than 100 grand. Well, that could be 5 million. It could be 105,000. So when you volunteer an answer to a question you've asked of any kind, any answer, what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of good information you're going to get back from that person. And when you leave the silence out there, the longer it goes on, the more you're kind of maneuvering the person you're talking to into giving you an answer. Don't let them off the hook. You know, that's a big one when you're talking about money. And so, yeah, when that comes up, that's the way to handle the money. But so, how do I talk to people I've never met before? Well, I research them on LinkedIn, I research them on Google, I research them on Facebook. I go to the website and I pour over everything I can find. In the software world, there's a place called GitHub. It's where software programmers put examples of their code. Depending on the industry you're in, if you're an artist, you know, there might be other repositories, SoundCloud, you know, there might be other repositories where you would have examples of your work, but other people would have examples of theirs as well. And so the questions that come from that would be unique to those particular circumstances, but the big ones are, culture, environment, growth opportunities. What are you personally, you've interviewed a few people. What's been missing? What's been missing? So that gives the person that you're talking to a strong sense that you're prepared, you're interested, you ask good questions, you listen well. Interviews are an opportunity to give the other person intimate insight into who you are. And oftentimes when we go on interviews, we throw that opportunity away. And all of this stuff to me is valuable because interviews can be nerve wracking. But rest assured, if you're 100% prepared for an interview and you've done all your homework, I guarantee you're going to walk into there a lot more confident than you would if you didn't. And another thing, I talk to a lot of salespeople, and a lot of salespeople think, oh man, I do this all day. I don't need to prepare any further beyond this. I've been doing this for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. I'm like, interviewing and selling are two different things. They have commonalities, but it's not the same conversation. And if you take for granted and presume that you're prepared because of other experiences that appear to be similar, that's the kiss of death. Most of the people that I talk to in sales capacities, they just like to talk and they don't listen well at all. Real good salespeople do two things. They listen really well and they tell really good stories. So I was coaching a guy the other day, a young fella, and his mom was on the call. She and I bumped into each other as colleagues, and she said, "Could you help John?" And I said, "Sure." She goes, "Mind if I listen?" I said, "No, I'd love to have you listen." That was kind of cool. I'd never done that before. And apparently the interviewer asked him a question about his biggest challenge, because I had said, my favorite question in an interview is, tell me about the biggest life challenge you've ever had, and then tell me the story about how you overcame it and came out the other side. That is literally, unless you're a very specific type of engineer or doctor or lawyer, somebody who needs a very specific proprietary level of knowledge, I don't really need to know much more about somebody than how they answer that question. So it's also something that you should be prepared for as well. And it should be fraught with personal accountability and solution seeking, and it should be devoid of blame and judgment and excuses and circumstances. Okay, so he gets this question, and his mom said, "Can I butt in?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, he had a learning disability when he was a kid, and he was challenged with reading and learning, and he's a smart kid and did well and graduated with a good GPA, but the first few years of his life, we were seeking out what's going on, what's the issue here, and once he figured it out and made some adjustments, then he made great strides and graduated, top of his class and all this other stuff." Was that too personal a story to tell? She said. And I said, "No, I like full transparency." Now, the only caveat to that is that you don't say everything right away. You save certain things like money, like benefits, things that might be perceived as self-serving. Those come up later in the conversation where you can fit them in contextually, where it makes sense to be talking about this now. And when the person you're talking to clearly already has now, through your conversation, all the knowledge they need about how good you are and what you can do and what your personality's like. So it's contextual. So just don't bring it up quickly. But I said the only difference that I would cite is the way that you say it. And all of these things that you say in interviews or negotiations of any kind have to do with your knowledge, certainly, your integrity, certainly, but the timing of your delivery, right? And how you deliver it, the articulation of the delivery. So yeah, words are great. And I got a lot of good words because I've been doing this for a long time. And I hear a lot from people, "Can you say that again? I want to use that phrase." So I know, and I've seen those phrases make people take action. I've seen those phrases leverage my position. I've seen those phrases be helpful to the person that I use them with. And over a period of time, those you pull out the winners because they work, So I said, what I probably would suggest in future is, he says, "Yeah, I had this disability when I was a kid. It was a learning disability. It was a spectrum thing, and wasn't severe, but it cost me a lot of frustration. But man, once I figured that out, and I figured out all I got to do is outwork all these other people, I just started going straight up. So, hopefully you've seen what I did there, right? It's like, okay, I turned a challenge where, oh, this kid's got a problem. Do I want that problem? No, it's not a problem. It's a learning opportunity that he seized, which is what you want in an employee. And then he phrased it in such a way where it's like, this guy's going to work his ass off for me, right? So hopefully you can see how that those nuances kind of fit in. I didn't want to not say anything about starting your own business because I think many of you probably are considering a side gig or starting your own business when things are difficult. And I've been around long enough to have been through a few difficult economic downturns. Creates a lot of entrepreneurs because people that are concerned about the risk of entrepreneurship or people that are scared, people that have family members that are not encouraging that kind of risky behavior. And it's all relative. It's risky depending on how you set it up. But I thought just in addressing those of you that might have some entrepreneurial questions and time is not permitting us to go dive into all of them. Two things. One is I shot a video a while back and it's on my website. I think it's called seven questions you need answers to before you start your own business. And just generally speaking, because I do coach entrepreneurs and people with entrepreneurial aspirations. And the first time I started a company, I did it with my mentor, and I had a small equity position. That was a decent equity position. And he basically said, I will pay for everything and I will fund all this and set up I got the attorneys, I got the banking relationship, I got the financing, and I'll pay the rent and all the salaries and if you'll do all the work, and I will tell you how to do all the work. And so for the next 5 years, I basically learned how to build and sell a staffing company. And this guy was sharp, man. But so I really wasn't driving the strategy of that. I learned the strategy and then I implemented it later. But you can't start a company without not knowing stuff. You just can't know everything until you know it, right? So most of the people that struggle, in my experience, with the idea of starting up a company, they just don't, one of two things or both. They don't know what they need to know, or they know what they need to know, but they're driven by the great idea that they have. And they think that because it's such a great idea that everyone else is going to want it. And there's so many holes in that logic, yet it's what so many people do. So there's an awful lot of information out there. Just the local SCORE office, SCORE, and it's an acronym. I don't remember what it stands for. I was affiliated with them for a while, and that's all they do is help people. It's a bunch of retired people, many of whom have started their own companies, and you can just sit down with them for free and talk about your idea. And most of them are going to tell you, do you have a business plan? Have you done a SWOT analysis? Have you surveyed the marketplace so that you understand that what you have, your product or service, is viable, that people are interested in? And most people that come into that office don't have any of that information. So at the very least, if you don't know what you need to know, there are plenty of people out there, myself included, that can tell you what it is that you need to know. There's also plenty of tools in place, spreadsheets and such, where you can do mock profit and loss statements and cash flow projections, depending on whether you're seeking investment money. And that decision is really based on whether you want other people to have controlling interests and decision-making powers, or you want to maintain all that yourself. And if you want to maintain all that yourself, you got to find money somewhere else, or you got to bootstrap it, which is using your own money, which is what I did. Because you don't need a lot of money to start a staffing company. You just need a little bit of equipment. Right now, you don't need any equipment. You just need a phone and a computer. And so depending on what you're going to start up, I just tell people all the time, if you're going to make the move to start your own organization, no matter what it is, and all you have is a great idea, get in line, because there's tons of people with great ideas. People don't buy things because they're great ideas. People buy stuff, and this might be somewhat helpful in the interview process too. People spend money on things because they have been convinced that what it is they're buying is going to change them for the better. They trust the person selling it enough to give them money. They probably like, or the person that's selling them appeals to them in some way. They see some sort of empathetic experience there. And the service or the product it's going to do one of two things. And this is cliche. It's going to move them toward a more pleasurable state that could be thinner, better eyebrows, clothes. I mean, a litany of things. Or it's going to move them away from pain. And so, and people that sell well and market well, all their messaging you'll see is around this issue of, have I done a good job of defining for these people that are potential prospects who I am, right? What it is that I have for them, and what transformational experience is it going to bring them. And some of those transformational experience messages that are in sales copy are long and deep and broad and hilarious and animated. That's where the storytelling piece comes in. But I mean, if you're going to go look for money from an investor, no investor is going to give you money outside of a personal friend, which is a whole nother potential pot full of problems, unless you can articulate to him when he's going to get his money back, what return he's going to get on his money, and how much money. And if you don't have that story, you might as well not even go to a bank. And filling out those loan applications is crazy. But I think kind of is a few minutes left, and I think what I wanted to do is kind of close out, and I find myself having this discussion, particularly now with people, which is the way that you look for work, the type of work that you can go get and go do, is the options that you have are endless. And I think most of you are probably thinking, oh man, there's no jobs. Oh man, I'm not qualified to do that. Oh man, I've been on a bunch of interviews. Nobody's calling me back. It can be a very, very, very challenging and depressing and anxiety laden voyage. But chances are some of the stuff that I just shared with you is going to open up your eyes. And if you just got one thing out of this, it was worth your time. But the way that you look for work, you just need to flip it entirely upside down. And back to the beginning of our conversation, you just need to flip it completely upside down. You need to take risks, and you need to do things that are courageous, and you need to be in a state of preparedness, bulletproof, right? And you need to sweat the details, the clothes you're wearing, your hair, your facial hair, your hygiene, and don't forget that you have people around you, you have family, and you have friends. If you don't have an answer to the question, what do you do, that is articulate, concise, in about 30 seconds, well, then you have to create one. And when you go back and look in the mirror about what it is you want to do and who you want to be, that's part of that. That statement comes from that mental and emotional exercise. And I will cite one other resource that I recommend all of you get. I don't care what your circumstances are, because of this topic. And it's called Find Your True Purpose. And it's a workbook that you can download. There's an opt-in, but there's no cost. And the reason I wrote this thing is because a couple of years ago, I was bumping into people, because I didn't tell you this part of the story, but I'm transitioning from that brick and mortar recruiting firm where I place people and collect a fee, or deploy people, employ people and then deploy them as consultants, to online career uplifting coaching and mentorship. And that's available to you very evidently on the website as well. That starts with a 30-minute call that's free, where we go over what's going on, where are you, what are your challenges, where do you want to go, and how I think I can help you get there. And then after that, if you want to use my services, if you want to engage them, it's an hourly type cost, and we can work out the details. I usually don't work with people for more than a couple hours before they're massively in a better place. And all I do is go into everything I just said and then some. I go way deeper into all that stuff. And this exercise is, I think it's a 10-page workbook, 7 questions that lead to some other exercises. It's very actionable. It will help you find out if there's an intersection between what you love to do, what you're very good at, such that you can teach other people, and that you can make money, that people will pay money for. And most people, the vast majority of people that go through this exercise find an intersection, at least one, most find 2 or 3. And then now you have a place, an ideation can take place, right? Now you can be contemplative, you can dig deep down that hole. The thing that I would tell you about that exercise is it's very, very simple, but it's very, very hard, because you are forced, if you do it well and honestly, you are forced to ask questions of yourself that you've never asked before, and you're also forced to perhaps listen to some answers that you're not going to like. That's true of all of us. I've done it myself, but everybody kept coming to me saying, I got to find a job, or I need to do something else, or I hate my boss, or I hate my commute, or I'm not making enough money, or I got laid off. I mean, the litany of reasons people have for wanting to do something else. I said, well, what do you want to do? And most people look at me and say, well, what do you mean? I'm like, all right, here's the workbook. So it's an exercise I would say most people never do. And I go back to my original statement is, I remember getting told by my guidance counselor in high school when I was 17 that I should study business in college. And I said, why? And she said, well, because that's the way for you to find a good job. Now, she means well, and some would argue she was correct. I would argue she was not, but she was working with limited information. She didn't really know who I was. We had a couple conversations. I don't even remember her name, but that starts the process, right? I'll back it up. Dad wanted me to be a doctor. Mom was an attorney. She wanted me to come into her practice. A lot of people are doing stuff for work based on a suggestion that somebody else made. Coaches do it, right? Teachers do it. Guidance counselors do it. Friends do it. Uncles do it. Dads and moms do it. Okay, so we find ourselves in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s. Doesn't matter. Everyone's in career transition. Everyone is seeking out something better most of the time, or thinking about it. That's just the reality. But you find yourself and you're like, why am I doing this? Like, I went to work for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company out of college with a marketing degree from the University of Notre Dame. So I had some creds, right? But that job sucked, right? I hated that job. And it took me 2.5 years, almost 3 years, to figure it out, because I had this little voice in my head saying, you got a salary, you got an apartment, you got some suits, you got some ties, you got a credit card, you're in Chicago, it's fun, just it'll get better, and that I don't think I was ever meant to work for someone else, but that's a whole nother story. But I asked myself at a very young age what I wanted to do, and there were a lot of personal drivers, and it didn't happen for me until I was in my mid-20s. And I think most young people, if you're roaming around not knowing what you do, get in line again, because you're not alone at all. Most people that are my age, in their 50s, still aren't doing what they should be doing or want to be doing, or have something to complain about. And they're just, at some point you get stuck. Like, now I can't, there's nothing else I can do. I'm like plugged into this lane and I can't get out of it because I really don't want to put the energy and the work in, So this exercise of finding your true purpose is really, 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 really valuable. And I tell people, and I wrote this in the kind of intro to the book, that get a quiet space, get about 2 hours. You might just need 1, but block off 2. Turn your phone off, turn everything off. If you're into meditation and breathing, knock yourself out for 5 or 10 minutes. But this is going to require focus. And I don't recommend anybody begins the exercise, stops halfway through, leaves, and comes back, because you gain momentum during the exercise that is difficult to replicate if you return, having unplugged from that focused breathing, thinking, being honest exercise. I've had many people tell me that was awesome. I actually got a testimonial on it that I got to put up, my friend Mark. And most people say that was exhausting. So that those are both good signs, right? So that's what you do to prepare for everything else that we've just talked about. And if you don't do that first, you run the risk of focusing your energies in the wrong direction, wasting a lot of time and energy, or ending up in a job that you don't care for at all. Um, I helped my friend's daughter find work as a favor. I do a lot of that. And she was an office manager. I have no experience with office managers. She didn't like her commute, she didn't like her job, and she didn't like her boss. He was a dishonest, nefarious, manipulative person. The commute was brutal, and the job itself was boring. And she was in it for years. And I don't know if I hadn't come into her life whether she would have made a change or not, because she was, like many of you might be, why am I complaining about this? I have a job. Some people don't have a job. This is what I deserve. This is what I should be doing. This is what I'm comfortable here. It's safe here. I know I don't like it, but I know what it is, right? It's not scary. It's not new. It's like, well, you know, this is a time to try new things. This is a time to do scary things. Especially if you don't have a job, what have you got to lose? If you accepted a position that was so far out of in left field that you don't even believe you interviewed for the job, that might end up being the coolest thing you ever did. So don't look at it, what we're going through now, as terribly challenging, even if it is. Look at it opportunistically, because now you have the freedom and the permission to go do things that you might not have otherwise done. That's really good. That's really cool. You need to understand that's what's going on and appreciate it for what it is and take advantage of it, because you might have a job in another couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then you're locked in for at least a little while. So hopefully all of this was helpful. Again, this is my first Facebook Live event, so I'm hoping that when I go to the recording, I will not have screwed much up, but I'm sure I missed opportunities to clarify and connect, and I would like to do this again. So if you're watching this, then clearly you know how to communicate with me, Facebook Messenger, but I'll give you my email address. It's Mark with a K, and then it's my domain at the number 7 pillarsglobal.com. And I would encourage feedback. I would love to know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like to have seen done differently, any other topics that you might like. And if you do choose to grab a free 30-minute phone call with me, it would be helpful in the calendar mechanism in the notes section if you could just share with me that I'm doing this because I saw you on Facebook Live, so that I'd have some context for how you connected with me and how you found me. And then again, if you're, it doesn't matter how old you are, but particularly if you're young and don't have all the life experience that just comes with age, just comes with being here and going through stuff, I would say the two best places to go for augmented advice from me, additional advice and content from me. I think I'm closing in on 100 articles on LinkedIn, and I believe almost every single one of them is related to something involving career advancement, career development, career transition, and a lot of entrepreneurship stuff. So, which I think is also career development. And then Quora, Quora. Some people don't know about that. A lot of people don't know about that. It's a place people go to ask questions topically and seek answers from experts. And I have positioned myself as an expert in the career advice space. And I just looked at it this morning, and I think there were 567 questions that I answered. And so we only got to about 12 today, but there are at least 567 apparently. And I think those two resources, if you want to self-educate and really get yourself prepared for getting out there in the marketplace, I would go look for my profile on LinkedIn. And again, if you want to connect with me, send me a connection request, and please refer to this Facebook Live so I have the context there as well. And Quora is different. It's not. I guess they share stuff on Quora, but I have quite a bit of content there. So go take a look at both of those spots. YouTube's pretty good. I don't really use Twitter that much, and I'm not an Instagram guy yet. My kids are telling me I probably should be, but I think LinkedIn is probably the best place for my content. But having it in Quora makes sense too. So anyway, thank you for showing up. And I believe these get recorded. So this recording will be on my page here as content as well for you to refer back to if you couldn't take notes or you're eating lunch or whatever. But and share this kind of stuff. If you want me to do this again, let me know. But anyway, our hour is up. I hope that was helpful. My name again is Mark Aylward, 7pillarsglobal.com. And I hope I'll bump into some of you guys here in the next couple of days. Take it easy.